Grace was 19 years old, living in the bustling town of Enugu, but her life felt like an endless nightmare. Since her mother's death 7 years ago, her father had remarried a woman named Mrs. Okafor. To the neighbors in their busy street, Mrs. Okafor seemed respectable enough. She ran a small fabric shop near the main market, selling colorful Ankara prints and lace materials. Customers praised her warm smile and friendly manner. But behind closed doors, Mrs. Okafor was a different person entirely. Grace did everything in the household. She woke before dawn to sweep the compound and prepare breakfast. She fetched water from the community well, her shoulders aching under the weight of heavy buckets. She scrubbed clothes until her knuckles were raw and cooked elaborate meals that she was never allowed to enjoy. While Mrs. Okafor's biological children, Chioma and Emeka, ate jollof rice with chicken, Grace received only cold gari with no soup. Her father, Mr. Nwankwo, worked long hours as a taxi driver. He left home before sunrise and returned exhausted after sunset. By the time he walked through the door, Grace had learned to hide her bruises and swallow her tears. She didn't want to burden him with her suffering. The pain lived inside her like a heavy stone she carried everywhere. One humid night, everything changed. The full moon hung bright in the sky, and restless winds whistled through the zinc rooftops. Grace tossed and turned on her thin mat, unable to sleep. Strange whispers seemed to drift through the air, calling to her. Unable to ignore the feeling, she rose quietly and peered through the louver window of her small room. Her heart nearly stopped. For women dressed in dark clothing were moving through the backyard, holding hands in a solemn procession. Grace's blood ran cold when she recognized one of them. It was Mrs. Okafor. Curiosity overpowered fear. Grace slipped outside, moving like a shadow, careful to avoid making any sound. She crouched behind the old mango tree and watched with growing horror. The women formed a circle around a small fire in the center of the yard. They chanted in a language Grace had never heard before, their voices rising and falling like ocean waves. Then one woman spoke clearly in Igbo. "The time has come. A strong life must be surrendered." Mrs. Okafor's voice cut through the night. "Yes, my husband will be the sacrifice. His life force will bring us great power. In 3 nights, he will belong to us." Grace's hands flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. They were planning to kill her father. She had to warn him. She had to run. But as she turned to flee, her foot snapped a dry twig. Crack. The sound echoed like thunder in the quiet night. "Someone is watching us," one woman shrieked. "Catch her!" Mrs. Okafor screamed, her face twisted with rage. Grace ran faster than she ever had in her life. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted past the cassava plants, past the chicken coop, heading for the back entrance of the house. But suddenly, thick black smoke erupted around her. Her eyes burned. She coughed violently, stumbling forward. The last thing she saw was Mrs. Okafor's furious face and a flash of crimson light. Then darkness swallowed her whole. When Grace opened her eyes, the world looked strange. The grass seemed impossibly tall. The stones appeared enormous. She tried to call out, but only a loud "Mosie" escaped her throat. Confused, she looked down at herself and froze in absolute terror. She had 4 legs. She had hooves. She had horns. Grace was no longer a girl. She had been transformed into a goat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see what happens next. Will Grace ever become human again? The night seemed endless for Grace. She couldn't process what had happened to her. One moment she was a young woman trying to save her father's life. The next, she was trapped in a goat's body, helpless and terrified. Mrs. Okafor stood over her with a cruel smile, tying a rough rope around her neck. "Let's see you tell your father now," she whispered viciously. Grace tried to cry, but goats cannot produce tears. She tried to speak, but only plaintive bleating came from her mouth. "Mosie, Mosie." Her heart felt like it would break. That night, Mrs. Okafor tied her outside near the kitchen, pouring palm oil into a clay pot and muttering strange incantations before disappearing inside to sleep. Grace lay on the cold ground, her new body shivering. Fear consumed her thoughts. What would happen to her now? How could she possibly save her father from this goat form? Dawn arrived with the crow of a rooster. Mr. Nwankwo woke and stretched, calling out as he always did, "Grace! Bring me water for washing." Silence. "Grace, where are you?" he called again, louder this time. Still nothing. He frowned deeply. It wasn't like his daughter to be absent. She was always awake before him. He searched the house but found no trace of her. Shaking his head in confusion, he assumed she must have gone to the well early. But Mrs. Okafor had already set her plan in motion. She balanced a large basket on her head containing peppers, dried fish, and Grace the goat. She covered Grace with a heavy cloth and hurried toward the main market. Grace struggled beneath the weight, barely able to breathe under the stifling fabric. Her small goat heart raced with panic. No, she's taking me to the market, Grace thought desperately. She's going to sell me like meat. Mrs. Okafor hummed cheerfully as she walked, her expression normal and pleasant to everyone she passed. But inside, her heart blazed with wicked satisfaction. At the crowded Enugu market, Mrs. Okafor set down her basket and tied Grace to a wooden post beside her stall. "Strong goat for sale," she shouted to passers-by. "Very healthy. Good for pepper soup. Very fresh meat." People stopped to examine Grace. Some poked her sides. Others pulled her ears roughly. "How much?" one woman asked. 8,000 naira, Mrs. Okafor replied. "Too expensive," the woman hissed and walked away. Grace's goat eyes were wide with fear. She shook her head frantically, trying to communicate, but people only heard bleating. "Mosaye, Mosaye." "Keep quiet, foolish girl," Mrs. Okafor whispered harshly, pinching her. Hours dragged by. Many people came and went, but no one bought the goat. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly. Then a tired-looking young man approached. His clothes were worn and faded. He carried a small canvas bag over his shoulder. He studied Grace for a long moment. "This goat," he said slowly. "How much?" Mrs. Okafor's eyes lit up. "For you, 7,000 naira." The man nodded. "I'll take it." He counted out the money, and Mrs. Okafor quickly untied Grace and handed over the rope. Grace's heart sank like a stone. This was the end. The man led her through dusty streets to the outskirts of town near the Ekolu River. His house was modest with a corrugated iron roof and peeling paint. When they arrived, he tied Grace to a wooden post in the backyard. "Tomorrow," he muttered to himself, "you will make fine pepper soup." Grace's legs trembled. She wanted to scream, "I'm not a goat. I'm a human being." But only Mosai came out. The man went inside to rest. Grace stood alone in the yard, weak with fear and despair. She looked around desperately. There were clay pots, firewood, a rickety bench, and nothing that could help her. Then she heard soft footsteps. A young boy emerged from the house. He looked about 11 years old, barefoot, wearing a faded blue shirt. His name was Samuel, the man's son. He walked over to the goat and crouched down, staring into her eyes with curiosity. "This goat looks strange," he whispered to himself. "Your eyes. They look like human eyes." Grace's heart leaped with desperate hope. She tried again with all her might. This time, something miraculous happened. Her mouth moved differently, and a tiny whisper emerged. "Help me." Samuel gasped and jumped backward. "What? Did you just talk?" Grace nodded weakly, tears forming in her goat eyes. "Yes. I am not a goat. My name is Grace. I am a girl. My stepmother did this to me with witchcraft." The boy's mouth fell open in shock. His heart pounded wildly. "A girl? But how? Goats don't talk. This is impossible." "It's true," Grace whispered urgently. She transformed me because I discovered her secret. She plans to kill my father in 3 nights. Please, please don't let them cook me. Samuel looked around frantically. His father was still inside the house. What do I do? What do I do? He muttered, pulling at his hair. Hide me, Grace begged. Please don't tell anyone. Just keep me safe somehow. The boy nodded slowly, his mind racing. Okay, I'll help you. But how do we change you back? Grace shook her head sadly. I don't know. Suddenly, they heard the man's voice calling from inside. Samuel, come help me sharpen this knife. The boy froze. His father was preparing to slaughter the goat that very evening. Samuel couldn't sleep that entire night. He lay on his mat with eyes wide open, listening to his father's heavy snoring. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting shadows across the room. His mind raced with worry. The girl trapped in a goat's body was lying in the backyard right now, and by tomorrow his father planned to kill her for soup. He sat up on his mat and looked through the window toward the yard. He could see the goat's silhouette under the guava tree. His heart felt heavy with responsibility. He was just 11 years old. How could he possibly save someone from such dark magic? Quietly, he crept outside. The ground felt cool beneath his bare feet. He crouched beside the goat. Grace, he whispered. The goat lifted her head slowly. Samuel, she whispered back, her voice barely audible but unmistakably human. I don't know what to do, the boy admitted, his voice shaking. My father wants to make pepper soup tomorrow morning. I'm scared. Grace's goat eyes reflected the moonlight. Please don't let him. I must live long enough to tell my father the truth. My stepmother will kill him in 3 nights if I can't warn him. Samuel's hands trembled. He looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. God, please help me, he prayed quietly. Then he remembered something important. In the neighboring town of Nsukka, there lived an old herbalist named Baba Adeyemi. People called him the Wise One. They said he knew ancient secrets and had healed people of mysterious illnesses and strange afflictions. If anyone could help, it would be him. Samuel leaned closer. Grace, there's a man called Baba Adeyemi in Nsukka. People say he knows powerful medicine. If anyone can turn you back into a girl, it's him. Grace nodded eagerly. Yes, please take me there before it's too late. The boy glanced back at the house. His father was still sleeping. He knew he couldn't travel at night. The road was dangerous and too dark. They would have to wait until morning and convince his father somehow. The rooster announced dawn with its loud crowing. Samuel's father, Mr. Obi, woke and stretched. He looked toward the backyard where the goat was tied. Today we eat well, he said, reaching for his sharpening stone. Samuel's heart jumped into his throat. He ran forward quickly. Papa, wait. Don't kill it yet. His father frowned. Why not? Are you suddenly afraid of blood? No, Papa, Samuel said, thinking quickly. But this goat is special. Please, let's take it to Baba Adeyemi first. Let him examine it. Mr. Obi raised his eyebrows. Baba Adeyemi? Why? It's just a goat. Samuel swallowed hard. Papa, please trust me just this once. If it's only an ordinary goat, Baba Adeyemi will tell us so. But if it's not? He let the sentence hang in the air. His father stared at him for a long moment, studying his son's earnest face. Finally, he sighed heavily. Fine. You and your strange ideas. We'll go see this old man. But if he says it's just a goat, we're eating it tonight. He untied the goat and pulled the rope. Come on then. Grace's legs trembled as they walked. The path was narrow and covered in red dust. The morning sun was already hot, burning down on them. Birds sang in the trees overhead. Samuel walked beside her, occasionally whispering, "Don't worry. We're almost there." After nearly an hour of walking, They reached a small mud hut surrounded by medicinal plants. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, and carved wooden figures stood guard outside like silent sentinels. Smoke curled lazily from a small fire. "Baba Adeyemi," Samuel called out. "We need your help." An old man emerged from the hut. His hair was completely white, his dark skin deeply wrinkled, but his eyes were remarkably clear and penetrating. He looked at the goat, then at Samuel, then at Mr. Obi. Slowly, he nodded. "I have been expecting this visit," he said mysteriously. Mr. Obi frowned. "Expecting what?" The herbalist didn't answer. Instead, he bent down and gently touched the goat's head. The moment his weathered fingers brushed her horn, Grace let out a tiny whisper, "Help me." Mr. Obi jumped backward. "What? Did this goat just speak?" Samuel grabbed his father's hand tightly. "Yes, Papa. I told you she's not an ordinary goat. She's a girl. Her name is Grace." Baba Adeyemi closed his eyes and sprinkled white powder over the goat. The air suddenly became completely still. Even the wind stopped moving. The leaves hung motionless in the trees. "Child," the old man said softly, "tell me your story." Grace's voice came out weak but clear. She told them everything, how her stepmother had mistreated her for years, how she had witnessed the midnight ritual, how the women planned to sacrifice her father, and how Mrs. Okafor had transformed her into a goat to silence her. Mr. Obi placed both hands on his head in shock. "Oh Lord! And to think I almost killed you for soup." Baba Adeyemi opened his eyes. "It is true. This is no ordinary goat. This is a young woman under a powerful curse. But the curse is very strong. To break it, I must perform a special cleansing ritual." He spread a woven mat on the ground and carefully placed Grace upon it. He brought out a small calabash filled with crushed herbs and clear water. He sprinkled the mixture on her back while beginning to chant in a deep, rhythmic voice. The ground beneath them trembled slightly. The trees swayed. The smoke from the fire turned brilliant white. Then slowly, miraculously, Grace began to transform. Her horns shrank and disappeared. Her hooves stretched and became feet. Her body glowed with an otherworldly light. Within moments, the goat was completely gone. In her place sat Grace, weak, trembling, but fully human again. Samuel gasped in amazement. His father staggered backward, nearly falling over. "It's true. She really is a girl." Grace sat up slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for saving my life." Baba Adeyemi helped her stand, his expression both sad and kind. "You are free now, my child. But your stepmother is extremely dangerous. She will not stop her evil plans. You must hurry home and tell your father everything before it is too late." Grace nodded quickly. She turned to Samuel and smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Samuel. If not for your brave heart, I would be dead." The boy grinned proudly. "I told you I would help." Mr. Obi rubbed his head, still trying to process everything he had witnessed. "This is too much for one day. But you must go, child. Run to your father now. Save him before the third night arrives." Grace didn't waste another second. Barefoot and wearing only a torn wrapper, she ran down the dusty path with her hair flying behind her. She ran through bushes, across streams, faster than she had ever run in her entire life. The wind seemed to push her forward. The sun burned her skin, but she didn't stop or slow down. She had to reach her father. Back in Enugu, Mr. Nwankwo sat outside his house, his face etched with deep worry. He had searched everywhere for his daughter. He had asked neighbors, checked the market, walked the streets calling her name. Nobody had seen Grace. His heart felt like it was breaking. Where could she be? Mrs. Okafor sat nearby, pretending to sort beans, but inside she was smiling wickedly. She believed her plan had worked perfectly. The girl was gone, and soon her husband would be gone too. Then all his property would belong to her. Suddenly, A loud cry pierced the air. "Papa! Papa!" Mr. Nwankwo jumped to his feet. That voice. It was unmistakable. He turned and saw his daughter running toward him, dirty and exhausted but alive. He ran to meet her, and they crashed together in a tight embrace, both crying. "My daughter! Where have you been?" "I've been going crazy with worry," he sobbed. Grace pulled back and pointed at the house with a shaking finger. "Papa, it wasn't me who disappeared. It was her, Mrs. Okafor. She turned me into a goat using witchcraft. And Papa, you're in terrible danger. She plans to kill you in 3 nights as a sacrifice to evil spirits." The neighbors who had gathered gasped loudly. People whispered to each other in shock and disbelief. All eyes turned to Mrs. Okafor. Her face went completely pale. She dropped the bowl of beans, and it shattered on the ground. "This is a lie," she shouted desperately. "She's making up crazy stories. The girl has gone mad." But Grace stood firm, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "No, Papa. I saw everything with my own eyes. She met with 3 other women in our backyard under the full moon. They stood in a circle around a fire. I heard them say, 'A strong life must be sacrificed. In 3 nights, he will belong to us.' They were talking about you, Papa." The crowd grew larger as more neighbors rushed over to hear what was happening. "This is serious," someone shouted. "We must take this matter to the community leader. Let the elders judge." Mrs. Okafor's hands shook uncontrollably. Fear gripped her heart. She knew her secret was finally exposed, and there was nowhere left to hide. Within an hour, the entire community had gathered in the town square. The local chief sat on his carved wooden chair under the large Iroko tree, flanked by respected elders on both sides. Warriors stood at attention, holding their staffs. Grace stood before them all, her voice clear and strong despite her ordeal. She told the complete story, every detail of her suffering under Mrs. Okafor's cruelty, the midnight meeting she had witnessed, the evil plan to sacrifice her father, how she was transformed into a goat, how she was nearly sold for meat, and how God used a young boy named Samuel and his father to save her life. The crowd listened in stunned silence. Some women covered their mouths in horror. Children clung to their parents. The chief raised his hand for silence. "Bring Mrs. Okafor forward." The warriors brought her to stand before the chief. She was visibly shaking, her eyes darting around looking for an escape route that didn't exist. "Woman," the chief said in a deep, authoritative voice, "you have heard this girl's testimony. What do you say in your defense?" Mrs. Okafor's lips trembled. She forced a nervous laugh. "My chief, this is complete nonsense. She's lying. She's always been a difficult child, making up stories. How can a person turn into a goat? It's impossible." The crowd murmured. Some people nodded in agreement. It did sound impossible. Others shook their heads, unconvinced. The chief lifted his staff. "Bring the truth water." A guard stepped forward carrying a small calabash filled with crystal-clear water. This was sacred water, blessed by the priests. It was said that no one who drank it could continue to lie. The truth would pour out of them whether they wanted it to or not. "Drink," the chief commanded. Mrs. Okafor's hands shook violently as she took the calabash. Sweat poured down her face. She tried to refuse, but the warriors held her firmly. Slowly, she raised the calabash to her lips and drank. For a moment, everything was silent. The entire crowd held their breath. Then Mrs. Okafor's body began to tremble. Her eyes widened in terror. She fell to her knees, gasping for air. Words began spilling from her mouth uncontrollably. "It is true," she cried out. "It is all true. I am guilty." The crowd erupted in shock. Some people spat on the ground in disgust. Others shouted in anger. Mrs. Okafor continued, unable to stop herself now. "Yes, I hated that girl. Yes, I met with the other women under the full moon. Yes, we planned to sacrifice my husband to the spirits. They promised us wealth and power if we brought them someone close to us. I chose him because..." She sobbed. "Because I wanted everything he owned." The crowd roared with anger and disbelief. "Evil woman," someone shouted. "Wicked stepmother," another voice cried out. The air was thick with emotion. Mr. Nwankwo staggered backward, his hand clutching his chest. His eyes were red with tears of betrayal. "And to think I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking. "I brought you into my home, treated you with respect, and this is how you repay me? You wanted to kill me for money." Mrs. Okafor tried to crawl forward on her knees, reaching toward him desperately. "Forgive me, my husband. Forgive me. I was blinded by greed and jealousy. Please." But the chief's face remained stern and unmoved. He stood tall, his ceremonial staff catching the sunlight. "Silence." His voice commanded attention, and the crowd immediately quieted down. "Mrs. Okafor," the chief said solemnly, "you have betrayed your family in the worst possible way. You have betrayed the trust of this community. You conspired with darkness to take an innocent life, the life of the man who provided for you and gave you a home. You transformed an innocent girl into an animal and tried to sell her like common meat." The chief paused, allowing his words to sink in. The entire community waited in tense silence for his judgment. "From this day forward," the chief declared, his voice echoing across the square, "you are banished from this town. You must leave Enugu immediately and never return. If you are ever seen within our boundaries again, your life will be forfeit. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and leave." The warriors grabbed Mrs. Okafor's arms as she screamed and struggled. "No, please. Where will I go? This is my home." "You should have thought of that before you chose evil over family," the chief responded coldly. "Take her away." They dragged her toward her house to collect her things while she wailed and protested. Her children, Chioma and Emeka, stood crying among the crowd, confused and frightened. One of the elders spoke gently to them. "Don't worry, children. You are not responsible for your mother's evil deeds. You will stay with your relatives who will raise you with love and proper values." As Mrs. Okafor was escorted out of town, the crowd slowly began to disperse, talking among themselves about the shocking events they had witnessed. The chief turned his attention to Grace. His stern expression softened. "Child, come here." Grace approached nervously and bowed respectfully. "You are very brave," the chief said warmly. "You suffered greatly, yet you found the courage to speak the truth. Because of your bravery, a terrible evil has been exposed and stopped. You have saved your father's life and possibly the lives of others who might have fallen victim to these wicked women in the future." Grace bowed lower, tears flowing freely down her face. "Thank you, my chief. Thank you for believing me and for giving me justice." The chief nodded kindly. "Go now, child. Live in peace with your father. And remember this important lesson. No matter how long evil tries to hide in darkness, the truth will always find a way to come into the light." The crowd burst into applause and cheering. Women rushed forward to embrace Grace. Men shook Mr. Nwankwo's hand, congratulating him on having such a courageous daughter. Children followed Grace around, calling her the girl who came back from being a goat, and treating her like a hero. That evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the compound was quiet again. But this time, it was a peaceful quiet, not the fearful silence that had existed before. There was no more tension, no more hidden cruelty, no more walking on eggshells. Mr. Nwankwo sat with Grace on a wooden bench in front of their house. He held her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. "My daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "please forgive me. I was so focused on work, on providing money for the family, that I was blind to your suffering. I didn't protect you from that woman. I failed you as a father." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. "Papa, I forgive you. I never blamed you. You were working hard to take care of all of us. You didn't know what was happening when you weren't home. But now we know the truth. and we can move forward together. I promise you, Mr. Nwankwo said firmly, squeezing her hand. From this day forward, no one will ever hurt you again. No one will ever treat you as less than the precious daughter you are. We will rebuild our home with love and respect. The wind blew gently through the palm trees, rustling the leaves in a peaceful rhythm. The moon rose slowly over the rooftops, casting soft silver light over the town. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang its beautiful song. Far away in another part of town, young Samuel sat outside his modest house with his father. He looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky and smiled, knowing that he had helped save someone's life. His father put an arm around his shoulders proudly. "You did a good thing today, my son," Mr. Obi said. "You listened to your heart when something felt wrong, and because of that, a girl's life was saved and evil was defeated." Samuel smiled. "I just did what felt right, Papa." As the night deepened and the stars grew brighter, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for the future. The nightmare was over. The truth had won. And though the road ahead might have its challenges, she knew she would face them with her father by her side and a community that now knew her strength. The story of the girl who became a goat spread throughout Enugu and beyond. Parents used it to teach their children about courage and truth. Communities used it as a reminder to watch out for one another and never ignore signs of abuse. And Grace herself became a symbol of resilience, proof that even in the darkest moments, hope survives. The end. Moral of the story. Evil may hide for a time, but the truth always finds a way to shine through the darkness. A wicked heart may make elaborate plans, but a pure heart and brave spirit will ultimately overcome. No matter how heavy and long the night seems, morning will surely come. Stand firm in truth, even when it's difficult, because your courage might be exactly what saves not just yourself, but others too. Belle, thank you for watching this complete story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. Drop a comment below telling us what you learned from Grace's story. Want more amazing stories? Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next upload. God bless you.